Marcus Hale had built Aero America from scratch, a dream that started with a single leased jet and a folding table in a rundown Cincinnati office had grown into a national airline serving over 28,000 employees across every major U.S. city. Yet on this overcast Monday morning, standing just outside the frosted glass doors of the Aero America First Class Lounge at JFK, Marcus didn't look like a CEO. And that was the point. He wore a wrinkled button-up shirt slacks with slight creases near the hem and carried an old leather backpack that had seen more boardrooms than beaches. There was no name tag, no Rolex gleaming on his wrist, no flashy carry-on. Just a man in his late 40s who blended in with the crowd on purpose. He approached the check-in podium, calmly handing over his boarding pass and Aero Elite membership. The lounge attendant barely looked up. "Sir," she said, her tone clipped but not overtly rude, "we just need to verify your access again. This lounge is for our premium guests only." She didn't scan his card, didn't smile, didn't even pretend to care. Marcus blinked slowly, the words hanging in the air, like the chill of the terminal's overactive air conditioning. "You don't look like someone who flies first class." She didn't shout it, she didn't sneer, but the way she said it, calculated, quiet, almost surgical, cut deeper than a raised voice ever could. Behind him, a man in a sleek charcoal suit strolled up to the counter. Before he could open his mouth, the attendant beamed. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole. 1 right, your usual scotch is waiting. No ID check, no questions." Marcus didn't flinch, didn't object. He stepped aside, calmly pulled a small leather notebook from his jacket pocket, and sat down on the hard plastic chairs outside the lounge. He flipped open to a fresh page. The handwriting was tight, clean, the ink dark against the yellowed paper. Date April 3, JFK Terminal 4. Time 9:47 a.m. Event lounge access denied. No verification. Outfit judged. No smile. Assumed economy. He didn't write with emotion, just facts, patterns, observations. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't the first time he'd seen this happen. Over the past 10 days, Marcus had flown anonymously across the country. He'd watched elderly women ignored while struggling with bags, college kids politely offering platinum cards, only to be met with suspicion, families denied upgrades while sharp-dressed solo travelers breezed through. He'd logged each one, 22 cases before this morning, and now it had happened to him. This wasn't just bias. It wasn't a few bad apples. It was systemic. Baked into the culture of the airline he had built with his own hands. He leaned back in the chair, the noise of boarding calls echoing through the terminal. The irony didn't sting, it clarified. He was no longer observing from a distance. He was in the story now, and it was about to change. 2.5 weeks earlier, Marcus Hale had sat alone in his corner office on the 40th floor of Aero America's Manhattan headquarters. Rain lashed against the tall windows behind him, the wind turning the city into a blur of gray and motion. The data in front of him didn't make sense. Customer satisfaction was down. Loyalty indicators had dipped. But it wasn't the numbers that bothered him. It was the tone. People weren't complaining about late flights or lost bags. They were complaining about how they were treated, or more accurately, ignored. When Linda Barrett, his COO of 16 years, walked in without knocking, she carried 2 mugs of coffee and a hard truth. "It's not just the scores," when she said, sliding a cup onto his desk. "It's the patterns." She didn't have to explain. Marcus had seen it. "It's not something I can fix from up here," he said quietly. Linda narrowed her eyes. "You're thinking about going undercover again, aren't you?" He didn't respond. He didn't need to. "Remember 2010, she reminded him. "You pretended to be a gate agent in Charlotte for 3 weeks, pulled a muscle in your back lifting bags. You limped for a month. We learned more in those 3 weeks than in a year's worth of meetings," as Marcus said. "You're not low profile anymore," she warned. "Forbes Time, that gala last fall, you've been everywhere." He gestured to the wall behind him, a row of framed magazine covers and awards. "To most of our staff, I'm just a name in an onboarding video." Linda studied him. She knew that look. "You're serious." 2 weeks, he said. "Domestic routes, middle seat, no upgrades, no fast lane, personal credit card. I'll book under my middle name, Michael Harper." Linda sighed. "This is a terrible idea." "It's the right one." Now sitting in that cold terminal chair, watching Cole sip his scotch inside the lounge that had just rejected him, Marcus felt something settle into place. He didn't need another data point. He needed answers. He needed names. And he needed to find out exactly who had decided that dignity was a luxury only the well-dressed could afford. This wasn't a PR problem. It was a leadership problem. and he was ready to burn it all down to rebuild it better. But he had to stay invisible, at least for now. Tomorrow he would fly again. A new city, a new flight, a new lounge. Marcus flipped the notebook closed and slipped it back inside his jacket. From this point forward, the mask was on. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He was Michael Harper, a retired school administrator, visiting old friends. And no one, not the gate agents, not the flight attendants, not even his senior regional managers knew that the man they brushed off might be their last mistake. The next morning, Marcus Hale sat quietly at Gate B42 of Chicago O'Hare International Airport, legs crossed, fingers tapping rhythmically against the cover of his well-worn notebook. His jacket was slightly damp from the morning drizzle, and his glasses fogged up when he stepped into the terminal's warm interior. He didn't wipe them. Let them see the man no one notices. His name was still Michael Harper in the system. A regular guy, a retired school teacher traveling to visit his godson in Denver, or so his backstory claimed if anyone asked. But no one ever did. Over the last 10 days, Marcus had flown to Boston, Charlotte, Atlanta, Phoenix, and now Chicago. At each stop, he'd observed not just what was happening, but how it was happening. The pattern was no longer a hypothesis. It had become a rhythm, a quiet choreography of privilege and exclusion that repeated in whispers, glances, and smiles. He flipped open his notebook. Entry Year 23, date April 4, ORD terminal. 3x10, 13 a.m., event lounge entry. Granted without ID for a passenger in designer attire. Previous 3 denied for verification. Pattern intact. He stared at the page for a moment. A crease formed at the edge of the paper where his thumb rested. 23 documented incidents. No shouting, no blatant discrimination, just selective hospitality. Moments earlier, he'd watched a woman in her 60s approach the desk with a platinum card in hand and a kind smile. Her suitcase was scuffed but sturdy. Her sweater was cozy, hand-knit, not branded. The agent asked for her ID, rechecked her membership, then gestured her to step aside to confirm with the supervisor. Minutes later, a man in a navy quarter-zip and leather loafers walked up. No card shown, no questions. Welcome back, sir. Another page, another pattern. Marcus wasn't angry, not anymore. He was calculating. Because this wasn't just about optics. It wasn't just that some people were being favored based on what they wore or how they spoke. This was gatekeeping, intentional, structural, executed with the kind of precision that could only come from one of two places: top-down policy or cultural rot no one had cared to cure. On board the flight to Denver, he had purposely chosen a middle seat, row 22, between a drowsy college student with earbuds and a cologne-heavy business traveler who kept sighing into his phone. Perfect. Invisible. He watched as passengers boarded. A young mother at the gate struggled to fold a stroller. The agent behind the counter watched her fumble for 15 seconds before glancing away. But when the next passenger, suited sharp haircut, polished briefcase, stepped up, the same agent practically jogged out from behind the counter to carry his bag onto the jet bridge. A few rows ahead, an older man strained to lift his roller bag into the overhead compartment. A flight attendant passed by without so much as a glance. 2 rows later, another man, 30-ish, in designer sneakers, stood casually with his AirPods in. No struggle. No bag over his head. Still the same flight attendant paused, smiled, and said, "Let me help you with that, sir." He hadn't even asked. Marcus's pen scratched furiously. Denver Flight Event 4, distinct cases of preferential assistance based on appearance. Names noted on badges: Diane W., Greg H. Tone consistent. Not overt, always silent, always visual. That night back at his hotel in downtown Denver, Marcus laid out the last 5 days of notes across the desk. Dozens of entries. Clean handwriting. No emotion, just the story in black and white. But as he sat there staring at the accumulated evidence, something in his chest clenched. Not with anger, not even with disappointment, with resolve. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't scattered inconsistency. It was a system. An unofficial hierarchy based on looking the part. A quiet filter that judged worthiness by wardrobe confidence and compliance with unspoken standards. He was no longer unsure. He was certain. And tomorrow he would test the line again. Only this time, something would happen that changed everything. April 5, 7, Coronado a.m. Denver International Airport Gate, C-14. Marcus didn't return to the lounge that morning. Not after what happened at JFK. He needed to be on the floor, near the people, near the signals. He sat alone with a coffee in hand and his notebook open, observing the gate crew. He could see the same rhythm. An older gentleman with a Diamond member badge in his app walked up politely to ask a question. The agent barely looked up. "You're a little early, sir. We'll call by boarding group." 10 minutes later, a woman in a tailored blouse and designer tote approached. The same agent lit up, tapped away, and confirmed her upgrade eligibility before she even mentioned it. Marcus barely blinked. Another line in the notebook. Then came the voice. "They did the same thing to me last month." Marcus looked to his right. A man in his late 50s had taken the seat beside him. Gray flecks in his beard, a calm confidence in his posture. He wore travel slacks, a windbreaker, and a smile that hinted at someone used to being let down, but still found a way to make peace with it. Marcus glanced at his Aero America app. David Mitchell, it read. The man nodded toward the lounge. "Sarah's been doing that move for months," he said. "Delays the ones who don't look the part. Fast tracks the ones who do." Marcus's ears perked up. "You fly often?" he asked. The man chuckled. "Diamond since '07. I used to be proud of that. Now it just feels like a label only works when I wear a suit." They shook hands. "Michael Harper, Platinum." "David Mitchell. Nice to meet you." "You new to this route?" David asked. Marcus considered his words. "Not exactly. I've been doing some observations." David raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Instead, he looked out toward the gate like a man who'd been here 1,000 times. "You start to notice things when you're not traveling for meetings anymore. I consult now, dress how I want. That's when things changed." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Used to get pre-boarding friendly greetings, all of it. Then one day, I wasn't worth the smile anymore. Thought I was imagining it until I started keeping notes." Marcus's pulse jumped. "You keep notes?" he asked. David reached into his carry-on and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Typed columns, flight numbers, dates, notes in the margins. "I'm a numbers guy," David said. "This stuff doesn't lie." Marcus took a deep breath. "Have you ever filed a complaint?" David gave a bitter laugh. "3 times. Got the same copy-paste, 'We value your feedback.' Nothing changed." He looked over his shoulder toward the lounge and added quietly, "I don't want perks. I just want my loyalty to mean something, even when I'm not in a blazer." Marcus nodded slowly, almost solemnly. "I know what you mean." David narrowed his eyes. "Do you?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Let's just say, I've had some recent clarity." Minutes later, the boarding announcement rang out. David stood stretching. "See you on board, Michael. 3C and 3D. Hope you like aisle seats." He walked away calm and unsuspecting. Marcus remained seated, David's printed sheet still in his hand. He stared at it for a long moment, then folded it neatly and slid it into his notebook. The cracks weren't invisible anymore. They had faces, names, flight logs, and Marcus Hale had just found his first witness. The sun dipped behind the Denver skyline as Marcus Hale boarded the last flight of the day, Denver to Los Angeles. The plane was half full, the cabin lights already dimmed, casting long shadows over tired faces and flickering seatbelt signs. He slid into his seat near the back, deliberately far from first class. His disguise still intact, fogged reading glasses, thrift store, flannel jacket, old walking shoes. No one looked at him twice. He was becoming invisible. Perfect. He pulled out his notebook and scribbled 2 quick notes from earlier. Gate agent ignored Diamond member, in appearance or status again. Then just as he capped the pen, someone slid into the aisle seat beside him. He didn't expect to see her again, not this soon. Diane Walker, the same flight attendant from the Denver leg. This time she was off-duty in jeans and a Skybridge hoodie, her phone already out, thumbs tapping rapidly across the screen. She didn't notice him. Of course she didn't. He had worked hard to look unremarkable. Just another tired traveler on a late flight. But Marcus had a front-row seat now, not to watch her serve passengers, but to see who she was when no one was supposed to be watching. He turned slightly, pretending to look out the window, though his peripheral vision stayed on her screen. A name flashed. Thomas Reed. Marcus's heart skipped. Thomas Reed wasn't just anyone. He was Aero America's Director of Regional Operations for the Southeast, Atlanta, Charlotte, Orlando, and most importantly, Denver. He had risen fast after the merger with regional carrier Western Span Air, and he now had more operational pull than most VPs. Then he saw the message Diane typed. Some guy caused a scene at ATL Lounge. Looked like a confused professor or something. Kept asking questions. Said he was Diamond. Sarah made him wait outside. We flagged it. Marcus's blood ran cold. We flagged it. Another message pinged in response from Reed. Thanks. Watch for similar behavior at LAX. Same protocol. Another text from Diane followed in seconds. Already handled. Flagged him in the system. Verify ID at check-in. Random security check if needed. Then a thumbs-up emoji. Marcus sat frozen, expression neutral. His jaw didn't clench. His pulse didn't quicken. But behind the stillness, his thoughts raced. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't unconscious bias. It was coordinated, intentional, sanctioned. They weren't just acting on gut feelings. They were communicating in code using protocol and inputting flags into the internal system. He had been flagged. Marcus Hale, CEO and founder of the airline, was sitting in seat 22B, and the people working for him had marked him as suspicious because he didn't look premium enough. He exhaled slowly and leaned his head back. He wasn't surprised, not anymore. He was furious. Not with rage, not the loud kind, but the cold surgical kind. The kind that didn't shout it planned. Because if Diane was texting this freely, if Reed responded like it was routine, then this wasn't a one-off. It was a playbook. One carried out behind smiles, uniforms, and scripted greetings. And someone had written that playbook. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. He sat at the small desk in his Los Angeles hotel, a thin curtain drawn open to let the city's distant light spill in. In front of him, spread across the desk like evidence in a criminal case, were pages of notes, flight logs, printouts from customer policy manuals and backdoor access reports, quietly sent to him by Linda Barrett. All the behavior he'd seen, dismissals, delays, selective treatment, it had seemed human, subjective. Now he knew better. It wasn't just cultural bias. It was structural. He started digging through the memos, internal updates, operations notes. Reed's name popped up again and again. His fingerprints were all over the most recent policy changes initiatives like customer optics, prioritization, and brand-aligned interactions. It sounded like nonsense, but Marcus had been in boardrooms long enough to read between the corporate lines. What it meant was this: if a person didn't look the part, they didn't get the part. He found one chilling phrase buried in a policy brief from 8 months ago. Frontline teams should prioritize customer experience for those who reflect brand-aligned presentation and travel value. That was it. That was the rot. Brand-aligned presentation. Not loyalty, not ticket class, not status. Looks. He looked over at his notebook. Every name, every quote, every silent act of gatekeeping. Diane Walker, the smiling flight attendant, who skipped over the old man, but helped the man in designer shoes. Sarah Jennings, the lounge attendant who blocked Marcus at JFK. Kevin Rowe, the gate agent, who re-verified 2 Diamond members based solely on attire. And now Thomas Reed, the architect, the one pulling strings. Marcus wrote his name in large letters at the top of a clean page and drew a circle around it. Then he began drawing lines. To Diane, to Sarah, to policy memos, to unexplained override codes in the system, and finally to the flags. He paused and looked out the window again. The city shimmered in orange and gold. But he didn't feel wonder. He felt resolve. Back at headquarters, Linda Barrett moved quietly and efficiently. Through secure channels, she pulled back-end logs, override records, and metadata tied to the flagged passengers. What she found made Marcus's stomach turn. None of it was automatic. All of it was manual. Someone had trained gate agents and attendants to use their discretion at scale. A filter run by human eyes coded into the system, not by technology, but by judgment. They weren't just targeting people based on appearance. They were embedding those decisions into customer records. He stared at the screen. Reed hadn't made a mistake. He had built a machine. That night, Marcus shaved. The beard was gone. He pulled his suit from the back of the closet. Navy blue, fitted, crisp white shirt, his favorite blue silk tie. He looked in the mirror. The face of a man people listened to. Not the man they dismissed in seat 22B. He didn't smile. Because this wasn't about being right. This was about making it right. Tomorrow he wouldn't be Michael Harper anymore. Tomorrow Marcus Hale would walk into Aero America headquarters not to ask questions, but to demand answers. And behind him, he would carry 2 weeks' worth of cold, undeniable evidence. Because now he wasn't just collecting data. He was building a case. It was 7:58 a.m. when Marcus Hale stepped through the glass doors of Aero America's executive tower in Manhattan. The morning rush of polished shoes, barista greetings, and conference room chatter came to a sudden hush as the man in the tailored navy suit passed the front desk. The receptionist glanced up, startled for a second, then nodded. Not at the Sioux, but at the expression behind it. Marcus Hale looked like a storm had walked in, wearing a tie. It wasn't just that he had returned early from a supposed leadership retreat in Aspen. It was that the retreat never existed. And the CEO, who had left quietly, had come back with fire in his eyes and a folder in his hand. Linda Barrett was already waiting on the 40th floor, her laptop connected to the conference screen, a stack of flagged reports neatly arranged beside two steaming cups of black coffee. She looked up as Marcus entered and closed the door behind him. "No one knows," he asked, removing his coat. "No one outside legal and HR," she confirmed. "Meeting's at 11. Boardroom set. Press has no idea you're even in the building." Marcus nodded and opened the folder. Sarah Jennings, Diane Walker, Kevin Rowe. Pages of internal notes, system logs, override records. And at the top, Thomas Reed, promoted less than a year ago after the Western Span acquisition. Glowing performance reviews, highly praised for efficiency, cost-cutting, and regional standardization. Not one word about customer experience. Linda exhaled slowly. Larson pushed back. Said he had a charity auction in the Hamptons. Marcus gave a tight, humorless smile. He can explain that to the shareholders. She placed a hand on the table. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I'm done watching," Marcus said. "It's time they saw what I saw." By 11:03, the boardroom was full. 12 members sat around the table, senior investors, two legacy airline execs, the CFO general counsel, and even the reclusive founder of Aero America's parent holding company. The room buzzed with that peculiar energy only high-stakes meetings carry: quiet, alert, tense. When Marcus entered, no one smiled. No one cracked a joke. They felt it. He didn't waste time. "Thank you all for adjusting your schedules," he began. "What I'm about to share is not a presentation. It is not speculation. It is evidence, and it demands immediate action." The screen lit up behind him. Images, quotes, anonymous passenger complaints, gate footage, policy memos. He told it not as a PowerPoint, but as a story. A brutal, unflinching story. A man denied entry to a lounge despite top-tier status. An elderly woman ignored as she lifted her own suitcase. A father flagged for re-verification despite being on the upgrade list. And finally, himself. "I have spent the past 14 days traveling under my middle name Michael Harper across our domestic routes," Marcus said. "I wore off-the-rack clothes. I declined upgrades. I observed frontline staff without them knowing who I was." He let the silence settle. "What I experienced wasn't a bad day. It wasn't a staffing error. It was systemic bias based on perceived status and appearance." A board member shifted in his seat. "This seems anecdotal at best," he said. Marcus turned toward him slowly. "Then explain," he said coldly, "why your CEO, was flagged for secondary verification 3 times in 4 cities while wearing a $39 jacket." The room froze. No one moved. Because they knew what was coming next. Marcus laid it all out. The override logs, the staff communications, the internal memos that redefined priority passengers using coded language like brand-aligned presentation. He pulled up the text exchanges between Diane Walker and Thomas Reed. The protocols, the flagging system, the use of manual judgment not based on flight class or loyalty, but image. This wasn't rogue behavior, Marcus said. It was structured, deliberate, protected. He drew a deep breath. And it was approved whether implicitly or explicitly in this very room. No one spoke. Then he made his demands. Effective immediately, he said, the following actions will be taken. Temporary suspension of all discretionary override systems. Review and where applicable termination of personnel involved in discriminatory behavior. Mandatory retraining for all frontline staff. Establishment of a passenger advocacy council that reports directly to my office. The CFO cleared her throat. This will be expensive. Marcus turned toward her. Not as expensive as a class action lawsuit, or worse, a company that forgets who it's meant to serve. The board voted. 10 in favor. 2 abstained. It was done. But Marcus didn't let them breathe easy. This is only the beginning, he said. I'm not here to save face. I'm here to change the face of this company. By sunset 17, employees were suspended or fired. 5 were senior enough that Marcus handled the terminations himself. One of them, Thomas Reed. The confrontation was short. Reed entered the executive conference room looking smug, curious, maybe even a little arrogant. "Mr. Hale," he said, "is this about the upcoming review?" Marcus didn't stand. He didn't smile. He just pushed the folder across the table. "This is about your interpretation of brand-aligned passengers, your abuse of override privileges, and your pattern of discriminatory flagging." Reed shifted, then scoffed. "You can't pin that on me." Marcus cut him off. "I don't have to pin it. You texted it, you trained it, you documented it." Reed tried to threaten, tried to posture. Then he tried to beg. Marcus stayed still. "You assumed no one was watching," he said softly. "You were wrong. When security arrived, Reed didn't resist. He looked back once, still hoping for mercy. But Marcus was already opening the next file. That night, Marcus stood in his office, hands in his pockets, watching the city lights blink like distant runway beacons. Linda entered quietly. "It's done," she said. "Systems locked, access revoked, legal satisfied." He didn't reply immediately. "Schedule a company-wide broadcast," he said after a long pause. "Every employee, every airport, every gate. You want to go live?" "Yes." "No script." "No script." She nodded. "You did the right thing today." He turned toward the window. "Let's just hope it's not too late to make it right." At precisely 9:00 a.m. Eastern Time, Marcus Hale stood alone in Aero America's internal broadcast studio. No teleprompter, no executive script, just a camera, a red blinking light, and a silent promise not to look away. Across the country, in lounges, baggage tunnels, flight decks, and break rooms, over 24,000 employees tuned in, some curious, some skeptical, some bracing for corporate fluff. Instead, they got the storm. Marcus wore a dark suit, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His tie was gone, his voice steady, low, and unflinching. Behind him, no branding, no banner, just honesty. "Many of you know me as the founder of this company," he began. "What you may not know is that I started Aero America with 2 leased aircraft and a folding table. No investors, no safety net, just grit and a vow no one who walks through our gates should ever feel invisible." He paused, letting the quiet carry. "I used to sweep hangars. I've loaded bags in freezing rain. I've apologized face-to-face to passengers we failed. I built this airline not just to fly, but to serve. Fairly, with dignity." Another pause. The room was still. "Somewhere along the way, we forgot that." Screens in every terminal flickered. Flight crews stopped in their tracks. Ground staff leaned in. A few looked down. A few were already blinking back tears. "2 weeks ago," Marcus continued, "I left this office and became a passenger again. Not as your CEO, not as a name on the side of the plane, just a man in seat 22B. The room behind the lens had never felt so silent. And what I saw changed everything. Not because of how I was treated, but because of how I saw others treated." He spoke of David Mitchell, the longtime Diamond member, dismissed for dressing too casually. Of the elderly woman lifting her own bag while crew looked the other way. Of the dozens, no hundreds of passengers who paid the same, flew the same, but were offered less because they didn't look like they belonged. "We failed them," Marcus said, voice unwavering. Quietly, systematically, with a smile. "And for that I take full responsibility." He let the weight of it hang, but then he pivoted. "And that ends now." By the time the broadcast hit, minute 10 phones were buzzing. Screenshots were flying across employee group chats. Managers leaned forward, some with shame, some with pride, some with the recognition that they had played a role directly or indirectly. As of yesterday, Marcus said firmly, 17 employees have been suspended or terminated for actions that violated our values. We've rolled back discretionary override policies that enabled biased treatment. He listed specifics. All override requests must now be logged and reviewed. A passenger advocacy council composed of real travelers was being formed to provide ongoing oversight. A new leadership immersion program would launch immediately. Every VP, every director, including myself, Marcus stated, will work 2 days a year in frontline roles at gates, on ramps, and cabins. Because if you're going to lead, you're going to understand what leading means. He paused, then lowered his voice. "Some of you may wonder why I'm telling you this. Why now? Why not just fix it and move on quietly?" He leaned slightly forward. "Not for drama, for truth. Because silence is complicity, and this company will no longer be complicit." That line rippled across terminals like thunder. Then came the story he'd never told publicly. Not once. "I was 19 when I was stranded overnight at an airport. Flight canceled, no voucher, no hotel, just me and a vending machine that ate my last $3. He paused. "I asked a gate agent for help. She looked me up and down, backpack, jeans, maybe too tired to smile, and said, 'You'll figure it out.'" He swallowed. "I slept between chairs that night while families around me boarded other flights. And I promised myself if I ever built something in this world, no one would ever be treated like that under my roof." He looked straight into the lens. "I forgot that promise, but I remember now." When the broadcast ended, terminals sat in stunned silence. No music played, no intercom interrupted. Just a long collective breath across thousands of break rooms. Some employees sat down. Others stood up and quietly clapped. In Phoenix, a ramp agent named Luis wiped his eyes. In Orlando, a flight attendant named Kelly turned off her phone and stared at the wall. In Atlanta, Diane Walker watched from her apartment, her name already on the terminated list. In LAX, gate agent Kevin Rowe read the HR email and closed his laptop without a word. But in JFK, where it all began, a young gate agent named Maya stood taller than she ever had before. That morning, she helped an elderly woman in orthopedic shoes board without delay. No fancy suitcase, no luxury watch, just a human being finally seen. Later that week, Marcus invited David Mitchell to his Manhattan office. No cameras, no reporters, just two men and a quiet view of the tarmac. "You didn't have to say anything that day at the gate," Marcus said. David smiled. "But I did, and I'm glad I did." Marcus nodded. "You made a difference." David looked around the sleek office and chuckled. "I used to wonder if people at the top ever listened." Marcus leaned forward. "We do now." He handed David 2 first-class vouchers anywhere in the world Aero America flew. A small gesture, not payment, not apology. A reminder. More importantly, Marcus slid over another document. An invitation to serve as a founding member of the Passenger Advocacy Council. David hesitated, then smiled. "Only if you promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't forget this happened, and don't let it happen again." Marcus looked him in the eye. "I won't." That night, Marcus returned to his office. The storm had passed, but the rebuilding had just begun. He flipped open his notebook, now nearly full, and wrote one final line before closing it for good. "Respect isn't a feature, it's the flight." Marcus Hale sat at his desk long after the building emptied. The city lights outside shimmered in amber and white, reflecting off the East River like scattered diamonds. The broadcast was done. The terminations had been processed. The systems had been reset. But Marcus knew this wasn't a story that ended with a single company-wide announcement. Change wasn't a switch, it was a current. And tonight the current had started to move. The next morning, every Aero America employee from JFK to Honolulu received a digital packet in their inbox. Subject line: new culture standards, every passenger, every time. The first page had only one sentence, bold and centered: "Dignity is not earned by appearance. It is owed by humanity." The training modules included a powerful new framework, not just how to serve, but why they serve. Every override system that once allowed employees to silently flag a passenger for looking off-brand had been disabled. Every lounge, every gate, every check-in desk now had one directive: greet everyone like they might be the CEO, because one day they might be. Across the country, changes were already beginning to take root. In Atlanta, the gate where Marcus had once been stalled outside the first-class lounge now buzzed with nervous energy. The staff knew. Word travels fast in the airline world, and the story had gone viral internally within hours. The infamous jacket guy was their boss, and he had seen everything. Sarah Jennings, the lounge attendant who first denied Marcus access, was already gone. Her locker emptied before sunrise, but her absence was less shocking than what replaced it. A handwritten sign taped to the desk: "Welcome to Aero America First Class Lounge. All status levels verified by policy, not by appearance." The marker was still fresh, the words uneven, but for the first time in months, diamond flyers who looked average weren't being asked for secondary ID. They were being welcomed. At Gate 12 in Dallas Field, a young woman in an oversized hoodie and Nike slides approached the counter with her father's platinum membership on her app. The agent paused visibly, weighing the moment, but then nodded. "Welcome, ma'am. You're all set." The girl blinked, surprised. "That's it." The agent smiled a little sheepish. "New training starts now." Behind them, an older staffer leaned in and whispered, "We should have been doing it all along." Even in the air, something was shifting. On Flight 1182 from Boston to Miami, a flight attendant named Corinne paused her beverage cart and walked 3 rows back, not to assist a man in a tailored suit, but to help an elderly Latina woman struggling to recline her seat. No media, no spectacle, just empathy. As Corinne walked back down the aisle, one of her colleagues whispered, "Why her?" Corinne didn't hesitate. "Because this time I noticed." But not everyone welcomed the change. In Seattle, one supervisor complained that the removal of override privileges slowed down boarding. In Phoenix, a lounge agent questioned whether all passengers understood the expectations of first-class decorum. The resistance was quiet but real. So Marcus Hale made it clear, those who clung to the old system would not be coached. They would be replaced. Meanwhile, Marcus began hand-selecting the members of his Passenger Advocacy Council. David Mitchell was the first. Then came others. A single mom from Detroit who had once been denied gate check assistance because of her disheveled stroller. A disabled veteran from Denver whose pre-boarding rights had been ignored. A tech startup CEO who often flew in jeans and had stopped receiving upgrades. A teacher from Raleigh who had been re-verified 3 times in a row simply because she didn't travel with designer luggage. They would meet quarterly, virtually or in person, and every concern they raised would go straight to Marcus's desk. No middlemen, no PR filters, just truth. Because Marcus understood now, real leadership doesn't sit in the tower. It walks through the terminal. 1 week later, Marcus made an unannounced visit to the JFK terminal where it all began. No disguise this time. He wore his usual suit but no tie. Carried the same leather notebook now filled its spine soft with use. He stood off to the side of the same lounge that had once denied him entry. The staff noticed immediately. No panic, just surprise. Then, something remarkable. A young employee, maybe 24 glasses, slightly askew badge that read Maya, walked out from behind the counter and approached an elderly couple in line. "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Nunes," she asked gently. The woman nodded, surprised. "We noticed you've been standing a while. I'd be happy to help you with check-in and walk you to pre-board seating." The man blinked. "You don't need to do all that." But Maya just smiled. "I do now," she said. "It's how we're taught to lead." Marcus said nothing. He simply watched. Then wrote one final entry in a fresh notebook. It's working. That evening, as Marcus sat back in his office, Linda Barrett walked in holding 2 envelopes. "One's from David," she said. "He sent a handwritten thank you." Marcus opened it slowly. Inside was a folded note. "I flew last night. Didn't wear a suit. Didn't bring my briefcase. And guess what? I still got treated like I mattered. Thank you, David." Marcus held the letter for a long time. Then Linda handed him the second envelope. Inside was a list of anonymous feedback from passengers over the past 7 days. Positive, sincere, and one sentence that struck deep. "This felt like the airline I believed in years ago." Marcus leaned back. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. And it had all started not with a press release or a boardroom vote, but with one man in seat 22B. The conference room at Aero America's Manhattan headquarters had never been quieter. It was 9 or 8 a.m. sharp and the air was tense, so thick you could slice it with a boarding pass. Inside sat the top brass of the company department heads, executive directors, regional VPs, and the once untouchable Thomas Reed, Senior VP of Customer Operations. He sat in his usual seat at the head of the right wing, flanked by his loyal deputies, arms crossed like a man too important to be questioned. They didn't know it yet. But this wasn't just a meeting. This was a reckoning. Marcus Hale walked in with no slides, no assistant, and no laptop. Just the same leather notebook he carried on every flight during his undercover weeks. The same notebook that held the truth. He stood at the head of the table. The light from the floor to ceiling windows framed him like a silhouette, a man about to change the course of the company forever. Without greeting or pleasantries, Marcus opened the notebook and started to read. Flight 4471 from Charlotte. Passenger flagged for verification, despite presenting Platinum ID. Denied lounge access. No apology. Gate 18 Dallas. Passenger described as not priority looking in internal message. Overheard by 2 junior agents. Gate agent in Phoenix told another, "Trust me, this one's not first. Look at her shoes." The room began to shift. Chairs creaked. Eyes darted. Then Marcus looked up. "Each one of those entries," he said coldly, "was witnessed by me. Personally." Silence. He turned the page. On October 12th at JFK Terminal 4, a man in a navy jacket was asked to wait outside the first-class lounge. Twice. Despite being on the manifest, despite showing credentials, he was treated as if he didn't belong because of how he looked. Thomas Reed sat forward, now visibly uncomfortable. Marcus continued, "That man was me." And just like that, the room broke. A wave of realization hit the executives like a pressure wave at takeoff. The whispers turned into wide-eyed panic. Some heads dropped. Others froze in horror. Marcus didn't stop. He pulled a small USB stick from his pocket and plugged it into the screen behind him. Video began to play footage from internal security cams synced with audio logs, digital lounge interactions, and anonymized chats from employee group threads. "He's got the pass but looks off. Re-verify. Can someone override this guy? Doesn't match first-class vibe. Who let Walmart Steve buy a diamond ticket?" One clip had the room dead silent, a regional manager mocking a disabled man in a boarding wheelchair, captured laughing with 2 attendants. Another showed a customer service agent rolling her eyes after denying a single mom with 2 toddlers early boarding. "Are we running an airline?" Marcus asked softly, "or a country club in the sky?" No one spoke. He turned toward Thomas. You implemented the override flags, didn't you? Thomas shifted. Marcus, with all due respect, they were discretionary tools meant to protect the experience of premium flyers. Discretionary or discriminatory? Marcus snapped, his voice sharp. Thomas blinked. We were optimizing brand integrity. Customers don't want... Marcus cut him off. No. What they don't want is to be judged for wearing sneakers or for not carrying a $2,000 briefcase. What they expect is to be treated like human beings, not liabilities. The room was still. Marcus turned to Elaine, his COO, seated quietly to his left. Proceed. Elaine stood and handed sealed envelopes to 3 security officers waiting by the door. Each officer moved with precision, placing the envelopes in front of specific individuals. Thomas received his last. He didn't even open it. He knew. Elaine cleared her throat. Effective immediately, 17 individuals are being terminated for gross misconduct, policy abuse, and violations of Aero America's values. Gasps echoed. One woman burst into tears. Another man slammed his hand on the table. This is insane, Thomas growled. You're gutting half your ops team over optics. Marcus didn't blink. I'm gutting a disease. And then his voice low, calm, and final. This isn't about optics. This is about rot. And it ends today. Thomas stood, his face red. I built your priority program. I'm the reason first class runs smoothly. You're the reason we stopped seeing people as people, Marcus said quietly. That's not smooth. That's broken. Security stepped forward. Thomas didn't resist, but the look he shot Marcus was pure fire. As he exited the room, Marcus turned back to the remaining team. This is your wake-up call, he said. From this moment on, Aero America is a values-first airline. I don't care how many degrees you hold, how many metrics you hit, or how long you've been here. If you treat people like categories instead of customers, you don't belong here. 2 days later, Marcus recorded a follow-up video sent to all staff. He sat in front of a plain wall. No logo, no flashy production. Just a man speaking plainly to the people who flew his brand's flag. I failed to see what was happening under my nose. That's on me. But I also refuse to pretend that a clean uniform equals a clean conscience. We've removed the wrong people. Now it's time to raise the right ones. If you've ever been the employee who offered a quiet kindness, who bent the rule to show empathy, who gave respect before asking for proof of status, thank you. Your time has come. Promotions followed. A 24-year-old gate agent in St. Louis who had once bought coffee for a crying passenger, denied lounge access, was promoted to regional training lead. A baggage handler in LAX who helped a stranded deaf passenger find a ride was invited to sit on the new inclusion advisory panel. A flight attendant in Baltimore who diffused a racial profiling incident mid-flight became the face of the new Fly with Heart campaign. The purge hadn't destroyed the company. It had revealed its soul. 6 months later, the departure board at Newark Liberty International flickered like a pulse. Terminal C was buzzing as always, passengers wheeling luggage, agents scanning passes, the usual organized chaos of an airport breathing. But something had changed. The uniforms still looked the same. The boarding announcements still rolled out every 15 minutes. But there was a different kind of energy flowing through Aero America's gates. A calm, a respect, an undercurrent of warmth you couldn't define but could feel. This was no accident. It was the result of 6 of the most turbulent, painful, and transformational months in the company's history. Marcus Hale, now recognized nationally as the CEO who walked among us, had done more than fire bad apples. He'd rewritten the entire orchard. And now the fruit was beginning to show. At gate 34, a young woman named Tessa Linwood was traveling with her mother, wheelchair-bound after surgery. They approached the desk cautiously, expecting what they always expected: tension, bureaucracy, red tape. Instead, the agent, Luis Ramirez, 26, a recent graduate of Aero America's new Empathy First training, walked around the counter and knelt down beside Tessa's mother. Mrs. Linwood, welcome back. We've already arranged pre-boarding and saved a seat near the front with extra legroom. I've also flagged our crew to make sure you're comfortable throughout the flight. Tessa blinked. No one's ever said her name before boarding, she whispered. Luis smiled. Everyone has a name. That's how we fly now. Tessa looked around, stunned. Are you trained to say that? He laughed. Nope, but I was trained to see her as my mom. Thierry. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, David Mitchell, the retired teacher who had once emailed 17 times about discriminatory treatment and was ignored each time, was now the chairman of the Aero America Passenger Advisory Council. He sat across from Marcus, reviewing the final draft of the airline's new inclusivity charter, built entirely from conversations with over 4,000 real passengers. It's ironic, David said, tapping the table. All I ever wanted was a reply. Instead, I got a seat at the table. Marcus nodded. You weren't asking for much. You just knew what we'd forgotten. So, on every Aero America flight from LA to Boston, from Seattle to Miami, a new silent script was playing out. Flight attendants paused to look passengers in the eye before asking if they needed help. Ground crew greeted children first to make them feel seen. First-class boarding no longer felt like a velvet rope, but a respectful process because now everyone was offered a moment of acknowledgement, not judgment. A viral video captured a moment on Flight 227. A black teen boy in economy class offered his blanket to a crying toddler beside him. Moments later, the captain came out, knelt beside him, and handed him a gold Aero America pin. You just earned first class in life, son, the captain said. And on your next flight, it's on us. The clip amassed 3 million views in 24 hours. The boy Jamal Rowe was later offered a scholarship from Aero America's new Wings of Respect Youth Initiative. Back in the boardroom, a former flight attendant named Danielle Rivers, who had once been suspended for refusing to downgrade a non-traditional-looking passenger in first class, was now VP of Passenger Experience. She stood at the front of a company-wide Zoom flanked by photos of real passengers on the screen behind her. If you want prestige, she said, work for another airline. If you want purpose, you're in the right sky. Even pilots felt it. Captain Eugene Walker, who had flown for 28 years and hated corporate memos, found himself quoting Marcus's post-it note during an intercom address. For those flying with us for the first time or the 50th, just know we don't care what seat you paid for. We care who you are. We fly for you. Passengers clapped. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about presence. She would be one. And Marcus, he still flew once a week. No notice. No entourage. Sometimes in coach, sometimes middle seat, sometimes in the back row by the bathroom. Each time he carried the same notebook, except now the notes looked different. Agent in Minneapolis helped elderly couple rebook without attitude, wrote down their grandson's name for special gift. Flight 901, kid in autism spectrum, sat near lavatory FO, moved quietly to switch a seat with gentle smile. New hire at gate 11 noticed a woman crying, brought her water, no script, just kindness. He no longer circled the mistakes. He starred the moments that mattered. Cerebrinum. One foggy morning at LaGuardia, Marcus passed a janitor mopping near the crew lounge. The man looked up. Mr. Hale, he said, you don't remember me? I was working JFK the night they wouldn't let you into the lounge. Marcus paused. The man smiled sheepishly. I didn't say anything. I should have. I was scared. Marcus stepped forward. You see me now? Yes, sir. Marcus held out his hand. Then that's what counts. Aero America didn't become perfect. There were still delays, still weather issues, still lost bags. But now when mistakes happened, people answered, apologized, listened, because now everyone had permission to care. And in an industry once built on tears and separation, Aero America was quietly redefining what flying meant. Not a service, not a status symbol, but a shared space in the sky where the most important upgrade was humanity. As Marcus boarded a red-eye flight back to New York one night, a young woman in a hoodie gave him her seat near the front. You look tired, she smiled. I've got strong knees. He laughed and declined. I run an airline, he whispered. But you just reminded me why. They both flew middle seat, side by side, together.